So in this latest video, we'll be focusing on how to add and subtract with negative numbers, also known as directed numbers. Now, as always, there will be a worksheet with their answers in the description below for you to practice everything you've learned in this video. Now, being able to work with negative numbers is an essential skill needed to progress in mathematics. Now, one of the main reasons why a lot of students struggle to understand adding, subtracting calculations involving negative numbers is because of the confusion and misunderstanding of its basic principle. Now, usually what gets advertised when you're dealing with positive and negatives is that two negatives make a positive. Now, although this is true in some cases, it can be misinterpreted and it can be made confusing when working with a combination of things for when you're multiplying and dividing and when you're adding, subtracting, which is hopefully what this video will help to sort of answer. Now let's just have a look initially at the basic number line. Now, number line is something that you probably used to when you were first introduced to the concept of adding and subtracting, and you usually find this on the top of the front of a classroom. Now, when you're looking at a number line, you can see that you've got a left direction and you've got a right direction, and you tend to find that the numbers get bigger as you move to the right and they get smaller when you move to the left. Now, the key notes are that when you subtract from a negative number, though the number gets smaller, the digit gets bigger. So for example, if let's say I had -3 and I'm going in this direction and I'm taking away 3, so let's say I had -3 minus 3, then the answer becomes -6. Now you think, hang on a second, well, I'm kind of expecting a smaller number, because obviously when you take away you think, oh, get a smaller answer. However, when you're dealing with negative numbers, the actual digit, the smaller you get, the digit gets bigger. And that's something that you really do need to understand when it comes to adding and subtracting. And likewise, when it comes to adding to a negative number. So for example, if I wanted -7 plus, let's say 5, then here I'm starting at -7 and I'm going to add, so I'm going to go to the right 5 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that gives me an answer of -2. Now, as you can see, when you're adding, you think to yourself, oh, I'm going to make the digit bigger. But actually, when you're dealing with negative numbers, it's all about the direction in which you're moving in accordance to the number line. So here you can see that when we're adding to a negative number, the digit is actually going to get smaller before. And then obviously when it goes into zeros, that's when it then starts to become normal, as you're probably used to when you're adding, subtracting with positive numbers. So just be mindful of that when you're dealing with questions. And like I said, try and visualize. If you ever get stuck, try and visualize a number line. Obviously, with certain questions, it can be really difficult. So for example, if you had a question like -47 take away 63, then obviously trying to draw a number line for that will take you several minutes to complete that. So it's just a case of understanding the components of a question, knowing what direction you need to go, and that will therefore give you some understanding. And with practice, you'll be able to find little shortcuts for yourself and be able to get to that answer relatively quite quickly. So let's have a look at the components of when you are adding and subtracting. Now, I always say that when you add and subtract numbers, there are three main components. One is a starting point, the second is the direction, and then the third is the number of places. Now, looking at the starting point, this is basically your first number. Now, this can either be a positive or a negative number. So if you imagine that this number, taking on board what sign it is basically going to say where you are starting along that number line. Now, the direction, now this is where it's the most probably complex part of any equation when you're adding, subtracting involving negative numbers. Now, if it's a plus, you're going to be moving to the right. If it's a negative, you're going to move it to the left because you're making the numbers bigger and smaller respectively. Now, if you have two symbols in the middle, now this is where it gets a little bit more confusing. So if you have two symbols in the middle, now sometimes that symbol might be attached to the number that follows it, or it could be somewhere in between. But however, you're always going to have a maximum of two symbols. You'll never have sort of just three symbols. You may have one, you may have two, but that's it. Now, if the symbols in the middle are different, then it's going to basically be a negative. If the symbols are the same, then it's going to be a positive. And this is where the little confusion lies. So you're only looking at the symbols in the middle. The first number is the starting point. The middle symbols are the key area. And then the last number, which is what we move on to next, is basically the number of places. So this, if you imagine a number line, This is basically the loops that you are doing. So the first number tells you where you're starting at. The symbols in the middle help you decide on what direction you're going, either to the left or to the right. And the last digit tells you how many places you need to move it. So now, before we move on to some examples, let's have a look at question presentation. Now, when you are practicing this, or you work through a textbook or through a worksheet or online, or maybe in an exam even, that you might find that sometimes that numbers that are negative may be written inside brackets. So for example, here we've got -2 in brackets plus -5, or 14 minus, and then you've got -17 written in brackets. Now the brackets there are only there to emphasize that numbers are negative and have no impact on how you answer the calculation. So they're just to make you more aware that the numbers that you're dealing with are negative. So how this question here, the first example, can be written is exactly the same as if the brackets weren't there. Now, if you have got a question that doesn't involve brackets, you don't need to add the brackets. You can just simply ignore it. And like I said, when we move on to some examples, we'll move forward. So if you do have a question that does involve brackets, then all you can do is just simply ignore it. You don't really need them. So again, it's entirely up to you. But like I said, if you see brackets, it's just to emphasize that the numbers that you're dealing with are negative. I personally would probably rewrite the question without the brackets. So let's have a look at some example questions. So I've just drawn a number line just to give you some formal understanding, but likewise with practice you want to kind of move away from using a number line and try and do this mentally in your head. So the first thing we'll look at is our starting point. So in this particular question, my starting point is -6, so this is where I'm starting at. I've got a plus, which means that I'm going to be moving to the right, and I'm going to be moving 8 places. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in this direction. So moving it 8 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the answer to this question is going to be +2. Now, if you want to write +2, that's absolutely fine. But when a number is positive, you can leave it blank. The only time you need to identify whether a number with a symbol is usually when it's negative. So let me just get rid of all of this so we're not getting confused with any future question. So again, looking at question 2, I'm starting at -5. Now here I've got 2 symbols in the middle. Okay, and I've got the number 6. Now the number that you circle at the end, i.e. in blue for me, is always the positive number. I'm not going to take any sign with that blue number. It's always going to be a positive number. Now, so here I'm starting at -5. Now here you can see I've got 2 symbols. Now the 2 symbols are different, so that means it's going to be a minus. So this question could be rewritten as -5 -6. So here I'm going to be going in the left direction, and I'm going 6 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So even though I'm going off my number line, I can assume that it's going to be -11, and there is my final answer. Moving on to example 3. So again, I'm going to circle my key components. So here I've got -4. I've got my digit at the end, which is the 3. And I'm going to circle the digits in the middle. So here what you've got is, and again, rewriting this, I've got -4. Now the symbols in the middle I've got 2 symbols and they're both the same. So that's going to turn into a plus. And then I've got +3. So here what I'm doing is, and let's just get rid of all the remnants from the previous example. So here I'm starting at -4. I'm adding, so again if I just put adding going that direction, subtraction going in this direction. So I'm adding 3, so 1, 2, 3. So the answer therefore is going to be -1. Moving on to question 4 again. I've got my starting position, I've got my direction, and I've got my number of places. So here I'm starting at -7. So again, let's just get rid of this number. Oh, don't want to get rid of that. So here I'm starting at -7. So I'm starting here. Now here I've got 2 symbols in the middle and they're different, so it's going to be a minus. So again, when the signs are different, it's a minus. When they're the same, it's a plus. And I'm moving it to the left 2 places. So that's going to be 1, 2. So my final answer for this particular question is going to be -9. Then moving on to example 5. So again, I'm starting at 1. I've got 2 symbols in the middle, and I've got moving it 6 places. So here I'm starting at 1, which is here. And now here I've got 2 symbols in the middle, and they're different, so it's going to be a minus. So it's going to be 1 minus, I'm going to be going in this direction by 6 places. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the answer then is minus 5. Then with example 6, again, I'm starting at 0. I've got my direction, which are the symbols, and I've got my number of places. Again, just to reiterate, the number that I'm circling in blue should always be a positive number. It should never be a negative number. So again, rewriting this, I've got 0, 2 symbols in the middle, and they're both the same, so that's going to turn to a plus, and I've got 2. So I'm starting at 0. I keep getting rid of that. So I'm starting at 0, and I'm moving to the right 2 places. So 1, 2, so the answer then is just 2. And then moving on to question 7. Again, I've got 10. I've got my symbols in the middle, and I've got my number of places. So here I've got 10. Now I've got 2 symbols in the middle, and they're both different, so that's going to be a minus, and I'm subtracting 5. So it's going to be 10 take away 5. So again, I'm going in the left direction, which then therefore gives me an answer of 5. And then with question 8, again, my starting position is minus 18. Now again, these are questions now we're slowly going off away from the number line, but the process is exactly the same. So I highlight what my starting number is, so it's minus 18. My 2 symbols in the middle are different, so it's a minus, and I'm moving it 6 places. So I'm starting at minus 18 and making it smaller by 6 places. So I'm going to the left. So here the answer is actually going to be minus 24. And then finally, with question example 9, again, I'm starting at minus 8. I've got my direction, and I've got my number of places, which is there. So here I've got minus 8. I've got 2 symbols in the middle which are different, or the same, sorry, so it's going to be a plus, and I'm adding 6. So here I am starting at minus 8. I'm adding, so I'm going to go to the right, and I'm going 6 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the answer then is minus 2. Now in the description below, I will put, as always, a worksheet and a set of answers for you to practice everything you've learned in this video. And I'll also include this Excel sheet as well. This one creates more different questions. Now, depending on what version of Excel you have, you may get this security warning. Doesn't mean there's a virus. All it means is that there's a macro added to this particular worksheet. And so all you need to do is just click on options, or if there's a yellow ribbon, just click on enable content. OK, and it should work absolutely fine. Now here you can obviously write down your answers. So here 4 plus 13 is going to give you 17. And what the example should do is tell you if it's correct and also give you some marks. Now there is a number line along the sort of side for you to practice going moving up or down. But obviously, like I said, and I always recommend practicing these questions by either writing them down if you're trying to get used to deciding on what the symbols are going to be, but trying to work through them. Hopefully in due time you'll be able to do these mentally. Now obviously if you're wanting to practice let's say a different set of questions, just press Ctrl and T, and the Excel sheet should give you a brand new set of questions and reset your answers. Now also attached there, if you've watched the video on multiplying and dividing fractions as well, there's another worksheet which works in exactly the same way. Obviously here you just need to press Ctrl and G and you will have a new set of questions.